So I just want to talk a little bit about that, because it's like we need to understand what thought is and what it's good for and what it isn't good for. And it's like thought has taken over ourselves and our world, and we don't even understand exactly what it is. It's the minute we're born, the world of thought has created the environment, everything about the systems that we live in, our family systems, our cultural systems, our economic systems, all of it. The national thing, it's all based on thought. And so we come sort of purely, beautifully into this world, and all of a sudden we're in the system of thought. And we're just breathing it in all the time. And he talks about thought creates the world and then hides it and says it didn't do it. So we think of thought as reporting into us what the world is about, when actually thought created that world.
Welcome to the Sacred Planet podcast. I am your host, Jocelyn Starfeather. We are living at the end of a massive 26,000 year cycle. This is a cycle that can be defined not astrologically, but astronomically by the movement of the North Star in the sky. Every 26,000 years, we come back to the original North Star. The times that we are living in now are when one of these 26,000 year cycles is ending and a new one is beginning. And so this is why this time when we are alive right now has been foretold in the ancient prophecies of many indigenous and ancient peoples all around the world, from almost every continent. This is why the world feels so chaotic, so uncertain, and so unstable right now, because we are truly shifting from one age, one massive 26,000 year age, into a new one. This is also why we are seeing so many changes in our own lives, so many changes in the world. It's because the systems and structures, the patterns and beliefs that we have been carrying for an extremely long time are collapsing. They are breaking down. And this is terrifying and also very exciting, because those of us who are alive at this time, we get to choose what we will build next. We get to choose who we want to become in this new era. So it's really important to know during these times that these are actually not only ending times. This is not meant to be an apocalypse. This is actually meant to be the closing of a door to the old ways of being and the opening of a door to the new ways, to the radical new world that we are here to build together. We are here at this time, at this momentous time, to choose what will come next. And so let us dream into a world that our children and grandchildren and the next 7 generations will be delighted to inherit from us. And let's begin creating it one by one from within ourselves. That is where all change must begin, is from within every individual, and then it is rippled out to the world in miraculous and beautiful ways. Here in the Sacred Planet podcast, we will be talking about spiritual awakening. We will be talking about the massive changes that are happening in our world. And we'll be talking, most importantly, about how you can support yourself, how you can feel most healed and healthy and whole and inspired and uplifted and ready to build this new world together, ready to choose who you wish to become next as all of the old falls away and we are left with a blank slate to create anything that we wish, anything that we dream into the future. Welcome to the Sacred Planet podcast. I can't wait to share the incredible speakers and topics that we'll be sharing here on the podcast. And I hope that it will be a tremendous inspiration to you in your own life. I am your host of the podcast. My name is Jocelyn Starfeather. I am the founder of Sacred Planet. Sacred Planet is a global community of people who are awakening to their true power and magic within and co-creating together and uplifting and inspiring one another as we build this radical new world together. I can't wait to share more with you. I'll see you soon in our next podcast episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sacred Planet podcast. I am delighted to be here with you today, and I'm so excited to be speaking with my dear friend and colleague, Tayria Ward. Welcome, Tayria. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you, Jocelyn. It's an honor to be here, and it's always a blessing and a privilege to work with you. So I love you.
Likewise. I love it. And we do so many fun and exciting and beautiful things together. So
all kinds of things.
Yes. Well, let me introduce you to everybody here. Tayria Ward, Ph.D., lives in Asheville, North Carolina, where she has a private practice offering dream analysis and psychological and spiritual guidance to clients from all parts of the world. Tayria has worked intensively with her own and other people's dreams for more than 45 years, and for nearly 30 years, she has been an avid student of indigenous ways of knowing and being. Tayria has conducted a monthly Global Dream Symposium that we work together on, which is just incredible, since early 2017, wherein people from all over the world come to share their dreams and listen to the collective dreaming mind. Tayria conducts retreats and vision quests, teaches online courses, and teaches to a wide audience in regular interviews and lectures. She also offers private oracular readings upon request. And so, Tayria, your topic for today is Don't Think, Reflections on the Nature of Thought. And I'm really excited to dive into this with you today. And so could you tell us, first of all, why did you choose this topic of Don't Think?
Well, I'm excited to talk about it. I think it's the first time I've really addressed it out loud. I've been working with it internally, and I'll tell the story right now, but I've been working with it internally for a while, but this is the first time I'm trying to really find a voice for what it is about for me. Anybody who knows me, as you know me well, my house is like a library. The hall, every room has bookcases and bookcases and bookcases. So I'm definitely a thinker. I like thinking. I think all the time, as we all do. But so it's not that I'm, ever going to be able to speak against our faculty for thinking, but I'm going to speak about it and about this guidance that came to me. And there's a couple of events where it felt to me like the divine voice that came in and said, don't think. And both of these were kind of critical moments, and I'll explain each of them. One was waking and one was dreaming. And I've been working with that admonition for years since then. So the first story I'll tell is in 2019, I was with my friend Veronica Goodchild. We were on a pilgrimage in the UK that she was leading. And right at the end of our pilgrimage time, we had prayed that a crop circle might arrive, because all my life, not all my life, ever since I learned of crop circles, I had such a passionate interest in being able to have the experience of entering one. And so we had a little prayer, and we asked for one to arrive, and a lot of them arrive in the UK on property that you can't enter. So we were very specific about our prayer. We needed to arrive about this time before we leave the country. We need for it to be on a property that we can actually enter. And it happened. It happened like a couple of days before we left. It came soon after our prayer. So that felt like a wonderful timing and a little miracle there. And so we were able to find it, and we talked to the beautiful farmer, and he let us enter his field. And we went into the crop circle, and the energy in me was so high, I barely knew what to do. And I heard this voice said to me, don't think. It's like, simply do not try to think about this. That's the way you are here. Don't think. And so I was like, okay, this wasn't my own sort of something coming out of me. It was something that felt like it came from that other dimension. It's like, thinking is not going to help you have this experience, so stop it. And so that's kind of how I felt like I was attempting to operate as I spent the hours that we spent just sort of wandering and meditating. And Veronica and I had a really deep, good laugh at one point that I felt like was part of the sort of the overflow of the joy. I can even remember the joke we were telling, but I won't tell it now. But it was just like we just laughed until we felt like we were coming undone. There was something so powerful, high, and beautiful about the energy of that. But then after that, there was a conference in Devises, a crop circle conference that we were attending that just started that day. So we were in the crop circle. We went to the conference in the evening, and I was overflowing with the energy of having been there. But everybody was thinking, giving their thoughts and thoughts and thoughts and thoughts. And I was having this experience of cognitive dissonance, of just like words. It was almost like, what is it in the Charlie Brown movies when the Lucy and Linus and all of them are talking, they have the adults in the background going, wah, 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 wah. And that's what, adult conversation is to kids. And that's kind of what I felt like there. It was like all this thinking. And I was in such a different place that I couldn't follow it. I didn't want to. So I felt a little like a fish out of water. And I want to say, as I say this, of my great respect for these conferences and the people who really track, and work with what their experience of following the messages that are coming to us through these events. So not to in any way disparage what I felt they were doing, but I just wasn't in it. And so I worked with that for quite a while. I've been working with it ever since, that sort of what is and was that about? And there are times that I feel more clear, and sometimes I just, I know there's just so much more for me to explore with this. And so recently, not too long ago, just maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I had a series of synchronicities. It was very powerful, and it's its own story, but and it caused me to go spelunking in my dream journals and find a dream that I had in 2014. I couldn't even remember quite what year I'd had it, but I went looking for it, and I found it. The dream was one of the most powerful dreams I've ever had. And in the dream, I won't tell the whole story, but I was told by my younger daughter, she came into the room and she said, "Mom, Archangel Gabriel is looking for you, and he wants you to do this certain thing, and then he can find you." And she seemed a little annoyed, which I think is cute. She was like, "Your people are bothering me, Mother." So I went and did what the Archangel had said to do. And then all of a sudden, the room that I was in exploded in this most magnificent way in white, crystalline rainbow light. It was just like, I can still see it, feel it, at that vibratory level when I think of that dream. And the words came to me in that dream, "Don't think," because I started to think. And I was so surprised when I found this, because that happened to me at the crop circle in 2019. So I went back and looked at this magnificent dream in 2014, and there it was again, "Don't think." So I have been really working with what this message is about. What's his name, Jocelyn? You know his name. Puma, it's Freddie Gispe.
Gispe Singona, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I listened to one of his lectures, and he was discussing how we're moving from 3D to 5D. And he says 5D is basically the dream time. So we're moving in toward that. And I've done a lot of talking and thinking about dream thinking, what I call dream thinking. I have a few interviews and lectures that I've done on that. So it's like we're moving into this whole different model of how to think about thought that is the dream time. And I was so struck with that when I heard him say those words. That's fascinating to think that we're moving now into more sort of, who knows what it means, permanent, like entry into this other dimension of our beings and of the beingness of everything, which is more the dream time, which is, I think our rational thinking is going to have to really, really take a back seat for us to be able to enter that dimension. So I think that's part of what this is all about.
Yes, that's so powerful. And I love how this bird is really chiming in right now. If you can hear it, it's very interesting.
Oh, really?
But
and a deer just walked right across while you said that. A deer just walked across my yard. So we've got the bird and the deer. Okay, so yes.
So it's this is it, right? That these, so many other forms of intelligence other than human thinking, right? And so many other ways of knowing and ways of understanding reality. And I do think that's the invitation now. As you said, I think that the constructs of our modern world are starting to really clearly not make any sense.
Right. Yes. Right. True.
We can't just rely on logic and reason anymore because it's not sufficient to comprehend what's going on within us, what's going on in the world around us. So this is so important what you're bringing up and inviting us into here.
Yeah, and when you mention the constructs of the world, that's the world that thought built, and it really doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes some sense in some ways at some times, and we're grateful for medical technology when it saves our lives or our kids. It's like, not to disparage it, but in some way we've just made such a mess of things, and that's the world that thought built. And so now, what kind of world can we build if we understand the nature of thought? And so that's what I want to talk about a little bit, just because I think it's essential that we come to understand what the nature of thought itself is. My sort of biggest teacher on that score is David Bohm, the physicist. I think he's known as the father of quantum physics. I learned about his theories around thought and around the method of dialogue. And I'll talk about just a little bit about the dialogue part, but he wrote this book. I just brought it to show people because I just think it's such a sort of an essential consideration and read, if possible, to read or at least hear some of his teachings about the nature of thought itself. And this book is called Thought as a System. And I used to teach a college class based with was the textbook. This and his other book called On Dialogue were the textbooks for that class. It was called The Physics of Thought. So I've done a lot of thinking about thought with my teacher, David Bohm, guiding the way. So I just want to talk a little bit about that because it's like we need to understand what thought is and what it's good for and what it isn't good for. And it's like thought has taken over ourselves and our world, and we don't even understand exactly what it is. And it's interesting. He says the way that we think of ourselves is it's a self that thought built. It's not the ontological actual nature of who we are. It's every time we try to conceive of who we are, thought has built that self. And so we want to get deeper into the consideration of what the world is and what ourselves are related to that. And so Bohm talked about thought as like this, it's a thing in itself. And so we breathe in thought the way we breathe in oxygen. And the way that we don't understand what all oxygen is doing in our bodies and don't have to think that through, it's just happening. That's the way thought works. We're breathing it in at all times. The minute we're born, the world of thought has created the environment, everything about the systems that we live in, our family systems, our cultural systems, our economic systems, all of it the national thing. It's all based on thought. And so we come sort of purely, beautifully into this world, and all of a sudden we're in this system of thought. And we're just breathing it in all the time. And he talks about thought creates the world and then hides and says it didn't do it. So we think of thought as reporting to us what the world is about, when actually thought created that world. But it's like what they say about the devil. The devil loves to hide and say it's not there. And that's when it's really got you, when we don't even believe in it. And that's kind of like thought, it's like it just hides and says it didn't do it, that this is just how it is. And thought is reporting to you about it. And so, what he says is that the thought we breathe in affects our brains, our neurochemistry, our electrochemical, everything, the chemistry in the brain, all of it, it affects that. And so it operates in us beyond our conscious choice until we come to understand what thought actually is. He created this method called dialogue, which gets people together, and it's a beautiful method that I used to teach in a college classroom. But the purpose of it, the sole purpose for him, the basic purpose of dialogue, was to understand the nature of thought and how it works in us, our defenses around it. He talks about the fact that we become addicted to familiar thought. So literally, it's a literal physical chemical addiction to think what we've been taught to think, or to think what we've decided to think, or to think what is familiar. So, and even if it's a very, negative, horrible thought, like your classroom teachers told you were very poor at this, or your parents told you were a bad child, or any of those things, we become addicted to those thoughts because they're familiar. And if somebody tries to tell us something else, the endorphin levels go down and we feel anxiety. It's like, no, I'm not good at this. I can't be good at this because I'm addicted to that thought. So he says we defend our thinking like the animal in the forest defends, with those instincts, because we think it's us. We think thought is who we are. We become identified with it. And so it is us. So if somebody is challenging my thought, and that's part of what you learn in dialogue, if somebody's challenging what I'm thinking, part of the process there is to separate myself from thought itself. So if they're challenging my thinking, they're not challenging me, they're challenging a thought, which is not me. I am not my thoughts. So it's a process of sort of disidentifying and working with the sort of really uncomfortable processes of overcoming an addiction to our familiar thoughts. When I went to Africa way back, I think in the early 90s, Wangari Maathai, beautiful teacher, author, Nobel Prize winner, she was leading our crowd. And I always remember what she said is, when the white man came here, they started drawing lines, like invisible lines on the land. And so this is this country, and that becomes that country. And so now you are a member of this, and they are other than you. They're from someplace else. And she said, so then the whole economics gets sorted out around that. People go to war and defend this invisible line. And there's nothing ontologically real about those lines. It's just thought put them there. Yet we defend our lives, give our lives in defense of this thing that isn't even real, that thought built. So how can we unthink what we've been taught to think and start thinking for ourselves? And that, when I say that, those are the words of Buckminster Fuller, who is one of my most important mentors in my life and thinking. I met him early in life. He was very close to our family, and so I got to hear him, and it was very formative for me. But one of the stories of his was it's such a great story. I could go on and on about him. I'll do some of that sometime. But anyway, so he, at about age 27, I think is when this happened. He finally realized he could not live successfully in this world that thought built. It just wasn't anything that made sense to him. He couldn't be a success at it. And so he, rather than take his life, which is something he considered, decided that he belonged to the universe and he didn't have a right to take his life. And so he made this commitment that he was going to go into silence for 2 years and not think, basically. To unthink was the words he was using, to unthink everything he'd been taught to think so that he could start to think for himself. So he didn't want to use words because words to him are like spells. Words contain this thought. So he didn't use words. He avoided words. He had a wife and a small daughter. And I always think his wife is a great saint because she did that. She just supported what he needed to do. But then he came out of those years of unthinking everything and rethought it all. He recreated the mathematics that was based on faulty assumptions. And his book, Critical Path, is one of the best reads you'll find about the journey that we're on now. He said these last years we've entered a critical path, whether humans are going to be able to survive on the planet or not. And he rethought all the systems. It was that unthinking that allowed him to become the revelator that he became in so many ways. And I learned that from your friend and colleague, Patricia Ayan, the Hakim Ayan, the great teacher of Egypt. He said the same thing. He said the hardest thing he ever did was unlearn everything he had learned at the university. He had to go through a process of basically deconstructing all of that. So I think in a certain way, we need to understand how thought runs us. As Bohm says, it's running us. We think we are the thinker. That's the illusion. We're not the thinker. Thought is itself, and it's running us. So if we can get into the idea, the process of understanding that we need to unlearn. And then he says, when an insight comes through such processes, that is like an active substance in the universe. An insight comes and it changes the neurophysical structure in the brain. It's actually a brain change when we have these great insights that can come through these efforts that we make. So it's important to understand really what thought is doing in us and to try to stay a little bit with the conscious consideration and meditation about how thought runs us. Yeah.
Thank you, Tayria, for this. I'm just, kind of immersing in these concepts that you're sharing, and we are so run by thought as humans. We are so foundationally based in thought, and the importance that we give it is massive. And these thoughts really form our entire belief systems of what we perceive reality to be, right? Who we perceive ourselves to be, what we perceive reality to be. And what if our thoughts that we've been taught to have are just completely wrong? And this is what's so interesting to me about studying ancient Egypt and other ancient cultures that had a very different perception of reality, right? I
don't think they were doing a lot of thinking when they did that. I think it was something else that was going on when they built those pyramids and made it was a whole other level of being that created that. I love taking your courses. I'm in the middle of one and have taken another of your courses on ancient Egypt. I think it's really revelatory in terms of understanding thought got built in the modern era, and it eradicated some of what we actually know because of it. Yeah.
Right. So that's the next question then that I would love to ask you is, how do we get back to that more original, more natural way of being before all this thought came in and took over, right? Or how do we really work with this idea of don't think?
Yeah. Well, I'll just tell that I have some stories, so I think I'm just going to tell stories around it. One of the things that's coming to me too, as you were just saying, your reflections there about the thoughts we've been taught to think. One of the things that Bucky used to say, Buckminster Fuller, he'd say he went to school with all these, like ideas and perceptions and all these things going on in his head, and the only message he ever got was, stop, listen to what I'm telling you. Shut down your own thoughts and listen to what I'm telling you. So he had to memorize the system of thought and eradicate his own connection to all this other universe. And that's what has been done to us since children. It's just to know that, that it shut us down in ways that, all well-intentioned, certainly. I don't consider the world, trying to hurt us, but it's the unconscious sort of control motivations, I think, that, that work that way. Yes. And fear and all of it. So, but here are some stories, Jocelyn. One of them is way back when I was doing my doctorate back in the mid-90s. Brian Swim was he wasn't one of my professors, but I learned a lot from him by listening to a lot of his lectures and so forth. Now, he worked at CIIS. He was on the faculty there. He's written several books. He worked with Thomas Berry. Thomas Berry was his teacher. So anyway, he was a great thinker that I really enjoyed learning from. And one of the things that I always remember that he said, which I found so fascinating, he talked about jellyfish. They don't have eyes and they don't have a brain, but they go on 5,000-mile migrations from here to there on perfect course all the way and get to where they're going right on time.
That's so amazing.
And for whatever reason, that just got me. It's like, okay, it's not their eyes and it's not their brain. There are these other instincts that they have. And I started studying the indigenous ways of knowing and being. And I feel like those indigenous ways are like a lot like what the jellyfish thing is about. It's not using thinking. I don't think that's how the connection happens with nature and who we are, actually, the instincts that we have, and that our thinking kind of shuts all that down, our connection to the natural world that is us. And to that aspect of ourselves. So I'm going to tell this little story that I felt like, okay, I think I'm awakening. Something's awakening this jellyfish thing in me. So I went through a very dramatic time in my midlife, whole process that ended up ending my marriage. I was very devastated by the events of that. And so I began to work with the shaman, and I decided, he was very supportive, but it was my decision. I wanted to go on a 10-day vision quest. He wanted me to shave my head. And I thought, okay, I was just starting teaching at a graduate school. I'm going to go there bald. I mean, this is a lot to ask, but I needed to work with him. I knew I needed to. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to shave my head, I want to go sit in the woods for 10 days in a vision quest circle in order to just assimilate who I am and what I'm doing and what this is all about. And I have said, and I will say, if you want to change your psychology in 5 minutes time, shave your head. It just it changes everything. I don't know what it is about it, but something about our hair defines or protects or presents us in a certain way that when it's gone, it's a very dramatic experience. And so I was very grateful to be in the woods, and I have lots of stories to tell about that period, but it was lovely. But one of the stories is that maybe about the third day there, it was like I was in another world. The human world was so far from me, and I was so relieved. And then I heard this voice, like we hear the dream, like I heard the don't think, like that kind of voice that comes into your head. And the voice said, this is irritating me. Can you get it off? And it was like a dream voice. And I thought, what in the world? What who said this? What is this about? It was a very clear message that came into my head. So I looked all about, and then I saw a branch on the tree that I was living under for those days. This big, beautiful oak tree. A branch had fallen down and was draped over. A dead branch was draped over one of the limbs. And then it instantly was clear to me. The tree was saying, "This is irritating me. Can you get it off?" And so I did, and I felt the tree, like that kind of wording, say, "Thank you. I got it off." And I thought, the tree spoke to me, like in English, so that I could understand what this message was. It was profound. And so I finished my quest and I went into the next phase of my life. And about a year later, I was sleeping outside on the ground about a mile from that place that I'd had the vision quest. This is on Hollister Ranch in California. That's where we lived. So I was sleeping outside all alone. And all of a sudden, like the middle of the night, out of nowhere, I jumped up and couldn't get my boots on fast enough, and something was pulling me. And I didn't know what it was, but all I knew was completely like that, maybe not like that jellyfish, it was just like, phew, I was going. And I didn't know why. And it was pitch dark. I don't think there was a moonlight happening. And I went through territory that it's wild territory. And I could have run into trees and bushes, and I even heard animals hissing sometimes when I was just running through. And I had no fear. I had no idea what was going on. And then all of a sudden I was at the foot of that tree, and the tree said, "Now, what can I do for you?"
Wow.
And I just wept. I knew that it had pulled me like the jellyfish migration. It had pulled me to itself. And now was saying, now what can I do for you? And so I cried, of course. And I said, I want to be able to communicate what I'm learning here. I don't know what this is, but I feel like I have to live it and communicate it. And I asked the sort of spirit of the tree to help me. And that spirit of the tree has been with me ever since. So, as you were saying, Jocelyn, it's like when the bird calls, I can be in here listening to the news. I'm an avid sort of, I pay attention to the world thought built, and I'm trying to understand how to navigate it intelligently. I can be in here doing all the things in the world that thought built, and all of a sudden the bird starts singing, and I literally shut it all down. I can just like shut the TV, shut the stove, whatever it is, shut it down and go be with the bird. It just matters. And their thought stops. And the wind will do the same to me. If the wind comes up, ooh, that's such an invitation. It just feels rude to me not to shut everything down and go be with the wind. I love the wind. And I'll tell this little story too. The story is called The Bird and the Bunny. I went out one evening and sat on my back porch just at the end of the day, trying to collect myself from the day and shift into the evening hours. And there was a little bunny that was hopping across my yard. And the little bunny stopped at the top of these stairs that are in my backyard, stopped right there. It was going this way, and I was facing it this way. And all of a sudden, the bunny stopped, and it's like it saw me sitting here, which was, I don't know, yards and yards away, but it was aware of me, and I was aware of it. And then we were like regarding each other. And then it was like we were staring at each other. It was almost like a staring contest. And then I started going into another dimension, and the bunny was maybe even coming into a human dimension. It's like something was happening there, and we stayed there. And then a little bird came up and sat on a little bush right near the bunny. And I felt like the bird was curious about this, and the bird sat there. So the three of us were like that for most of an hour. And then the bird flew away, but the bunny and I stayed. And then, and I thought, I'm not leaving. If this goes on all night, I'm here for it. And finally, the sun started to go down. It started to get dark, and the bunny hopped away. And I came inside and got on with my evening. But I'm telling you, I don't know what gets downloaded at a time like that. It's not thought. It has nothing to do with thought. And something gets downloaded. So these are the ways, if we allow ourselves to give attention to when we're called to be with something that is way beyond the realm of thought, that creates our world from day to day. Like the plants aren't thinking about how to send out this shoot, or how to produce that fruit, or how to make this flower happen. It's not thinking that happens there. And we are that. If we can get beyond this world that thought built and enter again into this aspect. And I have done journeys, shamanic journeys, where I went back in the earth to the time before there was even life on earth. Not even just human life, but organic life. And the spirit was alive then. The spirit of the earth was fully alive, but we didn't have the organic life yet. And I've been there, and that's deeply who we are, is that form of life is who we are. That's what we're born out of. And all of these other conceptions that have grown since then are interesting, but they're not the essential nature of who we are and what we are. So those are some of my stories about that. And I just feel like it's an ongoing, I feel so honored when I feel called to stop everything and listen. And sometimes I can be at a party and it's like, I stop the conversation I'm in. People are like, yeah, that's interesting about the bird, but what were you saying? I have to try to train myself not to understand that, that it's not always polite to shut it down the way I am inclined to. But yeah, it happens. And I answer the invitation every chance I get. So, yeah.
Yeah, that idea of the invitation is so important to what you're saying. I really think we are just constantly, at literally every moment, being invited out of thought, right? And into this imaginal, how the animals are operating, how the trees and plants are operating, how the sky, the earth, which is not human thought at all, as you have said.
Right.
So we can start to look out for those invitations, and we can start to say yes to those invitations, as you're so beautifully telling us about in these stories. It's really wonderful.
Yeah. And I think those are the opportunities we have to get beyond thought and underneath thought, and to understand thought for what it is, what it's good for and what it isn't good for. Those invitations really are powerful and precious. Yeah.
Yes. So what are there any other meanings or considerations you want to be sure to share here?
Yeah, I'm going to share this because this started coming to me just a couple minutes ago, just as I'm sort of gearing up to have this conversation with you. I watched it's a brand new documentary. I watched it right as it came out. I just happened to be, it's like synchronicity had it so that I had just turned off something that I was watching on TV. And then all of a sudden this documentary on Oppenheimer, it's called To End All Wars is the name of this documentary. It came on a few nights ago. And Oppenheimer is now a film by Christopher Nolan that's in the theaters, but this is a documentary about, with the real characters, portrayed in it, pictured in it. And then I can't wait to see Christopher Nolan's creation about it. I've heard really powerful things about it, and I'm so interested. So what came to me as I was watching this amazing documentary about the development of nuclear warheads, the atom bomb. What was coming to me is the revelation that was in all that about the atom, about the nature of who we are, that this power that is in the atom, that's what we're made of. That power that they figured out how to unleash is what we're made of. And I remember, this is a quote that I went looking for. It's in my dissertation. It's Lawrence Vanderpost. He wrote, and I think it's a powerful observation he was making. It is for me no idle coincidence that the most significant discovery in the physical world of this age has been the fact that the greatest and most unimaginable power resides in the smallest possible organization of matter. The force which threatens to blow the world asunder resides not in the clouds or the mountains, but in the invisible heart of the atom. The inner force, too, I love this point he makes, which, like the power of the atom, can either remake or shatter civilization, resides in the smallest unit of society, the individual. The individual is the secret advance base from which this power sets out to invade committee rooms, mothers' meetings, county councils, parliaments, continents, and nations. So this took me back to what I was reflecting on then and just Oppenheimer's work. And then I had this thought, watching Oppenheimer, as he starts to get this idea and work with what he was developing, you see these blackboards where all these, blackboards and blackboards and blackboards of equations that they had to do in order to figure out how to split the atom. And I thought, splitting the atom, this is the destructive power of splitting the atom is what came through all that thinking, thought, thinking, and then split the atom. And now we can destroy the earth. Yay. We won. That's what Truman said. Now we got it. And so I started thinking, how do we split the atom for the creative force that's in it, not the destructive force? And that took me to reflections on what we know about this character we call Jesus, who knew how to calm the storm, walk on water, heal the sick and the blind, turn water into wine. He wasn't on blackboards figuring out how to do that. He was working with a whole other way of splitting the atom and of sort of changing everything. And I don't think we even have any idea, what all got changed in that, and how these great saints and sages that come shift it all in this atomic kind of way. But I thought that, and he said, Jesus, I always think this is the most important thing he said, and this is what Bucky used to say too. The important thing is not what you see me doing, it's to know that I'm reflecting what you are capable of and more. And that's what Jesus consistently said. Ye are gods. Greater things than these you will do. The kingdom of heaven is in you. It's like all these things that you see in me, that's you. That's who you are. You are meant to open this. And Christianity got it so wrong, thinking Jesus is God and we are not. And, separating that out, that was antithetical to what I think that he was here to teach us. All of this sort of healing the sick, calming the storm, doing all of these, what we think of as miracles is just our nature to be able to do them. And that's the splitting of the atom that creates the change that we are striving for now, hopefully in this new era, before the destructive splitting of the atom, has its chance to do something worse.
Yes. And interestingly, he was most likely trained in Egypt and India, these extremely enlightened, very, very ancient cultures.
Jesus you're talking about was trained in Egypt and India? Yes, right. Yeah, right. So, yeah, I always think it's so interesting that Mary and Jesus and Joseph went to Egypt when he was a baby, and then we don't hear anything about where he was for 30 years, and then he comes back and he can do all these miracles. Yep. Well, they went to Egypt. Like, what were they doing there? What was he learning? It's like there's a lot left out of that Christian story that I think is worth considering. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm going to read this little quote of Christopher Nolan that was in that documentary, the guy who was the director of the new film, which I might even go see tonight, just to honor all this. He said this: "There has never been a moment like that in the history of the world," talking about when the bomb went off. "The view of the world, the view of what matter is, what we are made of, it palpably changes. It's unleashing a force never before imagined and can never be ignored from this point on." And I thought, that's such a good point. We can't ignore it now. Now we know what it can do destructively. So how do we consider what it can do creatively? How do we enter that field and understand the power that we have? Yes. And put thought in its place, what it's good for and what it really isn't good for. I think that's how we'll get there.
Such powerful considerations you're bringing in for us here, Tayria. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And this, this idea of, if we, it's these paradoxes that we have, right? So much has been coming through for me around this idea of paradox and polarities, but we have this, on the one side, extremely destructive potential created by thought, as you've said. And I just love this question. What's the other side of that? What is the creative capacity? What is the, capacity to do something for the good that is equal in power to the destructive force, right? But on the other side of the equation.
Right. I mean, we can split the atom. If Oppenheimer can do it, we can do it. We just have to know how and why and what for. And it's, it's all the teachers say it's love.
Right.
It's, that's the force, is love. And I thought, if I could split the atom of the love that I feel for my grandchildren and for my children and for you, Jocelyn, if we could split the atom of that love, there's power in there we don't know how to unleash yet. So.
Yes. And I truly believe that we have known in the past, and we are just in a time where we have forgotten, but we have the capacity to remember that fully.
Reclaim it. Yeah. Right.
Yes. Yes. So I know you mentioned you had a few quotes to share on these.
Yeah, I want to share some of these quotes, because all this time that I've been considering this, of course, things stand out to me. And I have just these great little quotes that I'm just going to sort of have. This is sort of a dessert to think about. But listening to one of these Buddhist teachers, and I've actually had this one in my head for a long time, where one of those Buddhist teachers, and I can't remember who it was, but he was listening to all his students and, talking about things. He'd just say, too many mind. And that was his answer to all their, questions. It's just too many mind. So, we can keep that one in mind. And then I ran into this, Joan of Arc. And she was with all the people, she's the young girl who was guided from these voices that come from beyond, how to save France. And so she led the army, and she was with all these, higher ups in the army, and they had all these tables laid out with their maps and their strategies and all the things they were going to do. And they asked her, they created their maps and strategies, and they asked her, what does she think? And her response to them, I don't think. I get my messages from God. So I love that. It's like, she wasn't thinking, they were doing all this thinking, whatever, but she was the one that led them to this victory. And she wasn't thinking. It wasn't thinking. She made it clear to them. It's not thinking that gets you there. I love that one. And this one is Einstein. I have a couple of his that I just love. I have never made any discovery by logical thinking. All of the knowledge came to me in moments of silence and moments of synchronous insight. And that synchronicity, that's another thing that happens beyond thought, but that's, a real guide and an event that we can follow in our lives that is so far, thought could never create that. It just is, it's the universe having its way with us. And Einstein also said, I think 99 times and find nothing. I stop thinking, swim in silence, and the truth comes to me.
I love that.
And I have go ahead.
I just said that's a really good one. I love that.
Isn't that good? Yeah. I stop thinking, it's like, don't think. And then it comes. And these next two are by Nietzsche, who's not one of my favorite thinkers in the world, but he is one and isn't one on the same. The snake, which cannot cast its skin, has to die. As well, the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind. And I love this one. I use it all the time of his. As a man now reasons in dreams, so humanity also reasoned for thousands of years while awake. And that would be that, maybe that 5D kind of like, that going into a dimension where the dream reasoning is how we operate and understand. And then I just happened to find this the other day of Teresa of Avila. Sometimes I have been terribly confused and oppressed by the turmoil of thought. Thought is not the same thing as understanding. Understanding is one of the faculties of the soul. I found it very hard to see why it is sometimes so resolute, whereas thoughts, as a rule, fly so fast that only God can restrain them. And this is another one of Teresa of Avila's. The important thing is to not think too much, but to love much. And so do that which is best, and so do that which best stirs you to love. And this one I just ran into, it's from Codebreaker by Sandra Biskind. Homo sapiens is giving birth to a new species, Homo spiritus. This is the transformation from thinking humanity to spiritual humanity, from the head to the heart, from the ego mind to the divine mind. And I heard somebody else use the term cosmos sapiens rather than Homo sapiens. It's like we're moving to cosmos sapiens. Okay, I have a couple more here. This is Matthias de Stefano. I took this down from one of his teachings that I listened to. Every reality we have is just thinking. It's not the real truth. Every being who was told how to go to the unity, the first thing they had to do was unlearn everything they had learned in their life. So there it is again. So you have to forget. That's the only way. The only way you remember is if you forget everything you know. That is what we call the void and emptiness. And when you finally begin to see that there is nothing, and you finally see that darkness and the void is the only place where you could possibly see everything.
Wow.
Talk about paradox, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Not lovely. Okay. And the last one is Thich Nhat Hanh. Do not try to find the solution with your thinking mind. Non-thinking is the secret of success. And that is why the time when we are not working, that time can be very productive if we know how to focus on the moment. So I have 100 more. Someday I'll share some more. Yeah.
Very powerful. Thank you, Tayria, for all of this. And yeah, I love these quotes to just kind of help us fully integrate these ideas and concepts. And wow, I think you've given everybody so much to work with. I don't want to say so much to think about.
Exactly. I'm doing a lot of thinking about not thinking.
Much to bring into our awareness and shift our thinking, really bring our consciousness to shifting out of that thinking mode. Right. And into all of the more, that is available to us here, and that is communicating with us, and the intelligence streaming through us from all these other levels that we are not taught so much to access, but we know are becoming available now again to us. So this is really profound. Thank you for all that you've offered here. And I know,
go ahead.
Yeah, and I know you have a wonderful free gift for everybody as well. Would you like to say a few words about that free gift? And
yes, I am offering a lecture I did a few years ago, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but it was for the Myth Salon in California, working with Pacifica Graduate Institute. But it was about the indigenous mind and dream thinking. And so I thought it might build on some of the things that we've been talking about, working with, because that became my passion, is to reawaken the indigenous mind, which is, kind of what we've been talking about, that other way of sort of perceiving the world through that indigenous nature that we have, like the jellyfish. And then dream thinking it's a term that I've been working with, is just how to think through the interesting logics of dreaming. And I feel like that is our medicine, the dreaming every night that we go to. That's the medicine, the cure. It's all there. So how do we get into the dreaming? So.
Yes. Okay. Wonderful. So that link will be right below this video for everybody who's interested in seeing that additional talk from Tayria, which would be wonderful. And also, Tayria, you do sessions with people, you do, dream work with people and oracular readings and so many amazing things. And it's just, I know personally, it's such a profound experience to have a dream of mine worked by you or an oracular reading from you. So I really want to invite everybody to go to your website and check out your offerings and, book a reading with you if they would like to have more of your very powerful, unique lens on what they're moving through. Is there anything else you would want to say about your work or your invitation to people listening?
On my website, there's a videos page. And also on the dreaming page, there's a whole course, a 12-part course. If anybody would like to just learn more about working with their dreams, I feel like that's the big sort of medicine and the sort of the potent sort of secret that hides in our, hearts and minds. And so how to work with dreams has been my passion for decades. And there's a lot of information there. So it's all free. You can go and just sort of pick through the different topics that I have there, or take that little course. It's called The Dreams of the Night by the United Palace in Manhattan. They produced it. So any of that's available. And then, yes, if anybody wants to work privately with dreams, they can get in touch with me through my website. And I do private sessions in that way. And then just supporting your spiritual sort of journey with all this. Sometimes you just need a witness and a support.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And you do that so beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah. I really invite everybody to go and see your website and also sign up for your email list if they feel called, if they want to receive, continued inspiration from you and notices about our dream symposium and that kind of thing. So everybody go and check that out as well.
If you're on my email list, I don't overwhelm, only if probably less than 3 or 4 things a month come out, but I'll let you know what we're doing. Jocelyn and I have some plans in the works. It'll be there. So, yeah.
Yes, we're working on something new, everybody. So you'll find out more about that soon.
Right. Okay.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Tayria, for all of this. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you today and explore these ideas. And I'm going to go off and connect with the non-thinking realms at some point today for sure, as I'm inspired by all of this. Thank you.
Yeah, you have a facility with that. So, yes. Well, it's an honor to be with you, Jocelyn. Thank you for the invitation, and blessings to everyone who's listening. Just all kinds of great blessings to each of you. It's an honor to be part of your world for the moment here.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, everybody watching. Many blessings. Lots of love to all of you out there. See you again soon. I hope you've enjoyed this wonderful episode of the Sacred Planet podcast. Be sure to click like and subscribe to our channel so that you will receive future updates. You'll know when we go live and when we are publishing the new episodes. And also be sure to put a note in the comments. What did this episode mean to you? What did this speaker and this topic inspire and awaken in you? And how do you want to share that with the world in new ways going forward? I would love to hear in the comments. And while you're here, go ahead and click on another podcast episode and open your mind, open your heart to more beautiful wisdom from the podcast. Much love, everybody.